Marble tombstones aren't made this heavy for aesthetics. They're made massive so that whatever is buried underneath doesn't accidentally crawl out. We love sculpting idols. The kind storyteller, the holy nun, the savior president. You buy these glossy obituaries because they're comfortable to believe in, but every icon has a rotten underside. While the crowd weeps at the funeral, someone is cracking open personal safes, finding encrypted porn diaries, and declassifying intelligence archives. And there, amidst Nazi dossiers, cocaine, secret families, and sadism, the myth dies completely, giving way to forensic examination. Today, we're going to exhume other people's reputations. 33 secrets that the idols of millions hope to feed to the worms along with their bodies. Put your gloves on. The autopsy begins. The chief architect of American Christmas was his own family's executioner, Dr. Seuss, whose rhyming lines about the Grinch melt the hearts of entire generations, in reality, built such an emotional concentration camp for his wife that she chose to voluntarily cross herself off the list of the living. While his spouse was slowly fading from a severe illness, this storyteller found nothing better to do than start a passionate affair on the side, methodically trampling what was left of her self-respect into the dirt. In her suicide note, she explicitly stated that this genius of light-hearted literature simply tore her heart to pieces. We read his books to children at bedtime to teach them kindness, sponsoring the legacy of a man who wiped his feet on the person closest to him in her moment of maximum vulnerability. It's like hiring Hannibal Lecter as the head chef at a vegan restaurant and admiring how he chops vegetables. At least the Grinch just stole presents, but his creator stole someone else's life, hiding behind bright illustrations. Welcome to a fairy tale where the villain wins and gets all the royalties. The brain of the planet's main genius rolled around in the trunk of a cheap car like a spare tire. Albert Einstein was terrified of becoming a museum exhibit and begged for his body to be burned to ashes so that onlookers wouldn't tear it apart for souvenirs. But human greed spat on his last will. Pathologist Thomas Harvey, fancying himself a high priest of science, stupidly cut out the late physicist's brain, stuffed it into a glass jar with solution, and for over 20 years drove this contraband around the country in the trunk of his car. We praise scientific ethics, but in reality, the most valuable biological computer of the 20th century was bouncing on potholes between a jack and an oil canister. Medieval savages carried severed heads of enemies on spears for power, but a modern doctor drove a piece of gray matter in a Ford, hoping to become great through osmosis. A brilliant plan that worked about as effectively as trying to download the internet onto a floppy disk. If aliens saw how we treat our best minds, they'd lock Earth under a quarantine dome forever. Your intellect means nothing if after the system shuts down, you're packed into containers. The scent of the most famous perfume in the world has distinct notes of the Third Reich. Coco Chanel, the woman who taught the planet to wear a little black dress and smell of elegance, turned out to be a banal Nazi intelligence agent. Only after French secret services opened their dusty files did the world read in horror the codename Westminster and Agent, number F7124. While Europe was drowning in blood, the style icon comfortably solved her business problems with the help of SS officers, leaking information and enjoying an elite life in occupied Paris. For decades, we were fed the image of an independent and strong woman, forced to buy bottles of fragrant liquid to join the legend. But in fact, we sponsored the legacy of a collaborator who used the Gestapo as her personal problem-solving service. This isn't just historical shame, it's genius marketing, where blood stains on a collar were passed off as a bold design choice. James Bond wore a tuxedo to save the world, but this lady put on tweed to sell it. An excellent investment in fashion, it's just a pity it was paid for with other people's lives. The fairy tale castle with fireworks was built on a foundation of snitching. Walt Disney, the man whose name is associated with a carefree childhood and fluffy mice, worked as a secret informant for intelligence agencies for over 25 years. This kind uncle from the screen paranoiacally hunted for communists among his animators, actors, and directors, regularly turning his colleagues over to men in strict suits. Did you think he was creating magic? No. He was creating the perfect system of total control where every brushstroke could become a reason for a harsh interrogation. We take our kids to amusement parks, buying tickets for the price of gold, to touch the legacy of a man who turned his studio into a branch of an Orwellian dystopia. It's like discovering that the Matrix was programmed not by an evil artificial intelligence, but by a smiling animator in a goofy suit. Every painted smile on the screen was paid for with someone's ruined career in reality. Mickey Mouse turned out to be not just a rodent, but a perfect metaphor, a rat always ready to give up its own for a bigger piece of cheese. The most hyped brand of holiness turned out to be an empty advertising shell. Mother Teresa, whose portrait became synonymous with absolute mercy and faith, lived in a state of pitch-black inner emptiness for almost 50 years. In secret correspondence that surfaced way too late, she confessed that there was only thick darkness inside her, and she felt neither the presence of higher powers nor any joy from her service. For decades, we looked at her wrinkled, peaceful face on magazine covers, believing she was connected directly to heavenly Wi-Fi, but in reality, she was like a customer support operator for a bankrupt company, forced to put on a headset every morning and fake happiness. It's a monstrous cognitive dissonance, where a person became a hostage to their own PR, unable to hit the exit button. If Truman from the famous movie knew his show was watched by millions while suffering from depression, he would have understood this saint. A perfect illustration of how a global image consumes the human psyche without a trace, leaving only a shell for donations. The most touching children's stories were written by a man with a severe deficit of intimate adequacy, Hans Christian Andersen, whose tales of little mermaids and tin soldiers shape morality from the cradle, left this world an absolute virgin. Yet researchers found in his personal trunks a giant collection of pornographic materials of that time and encrypted diaries bursting with maniacal, twisted fantasies. We read his texts about sublime love to toddlers, without even suspecting that their author was sublimating his monstrous sexual frustration into metaphors about suffering creatures. It's as if we found out that the architecture of Disneyland was designed by a serial killer between bouts of paranoia. The story of this storyteller is a classic bug in the system of the human psyche, where the blocking of basic instincts leads to an outburst of uncontrolled creative code. 50 Shades of Grey, compared to his hidden thoughts, is just a microwave manual. Good luck reading about the Snow Queen now without a nervous chuckle. The planet's main aviator used the world map as a route for genetic spam. Charles Lindbergh, the national hero who first flew across the ocean, shined in public as a model family man and the pride of the nation. But after his heart stopped forever, the funny logistics of his life came to light. He had 3 secret families in Germany and 7 illegitimate children who had no idea whose last name they were supposed to carry. We applaud heroes who conquer the elements, believing in their crystal honesty. But in reality, this guy just used his pilot status to play Sims with cheat codes for maximum reproduction in different locations. This isn't a feat in the name of humanity. It's the masterful time management of a sociopath who managed to deceive multiple women on different continents without losing his sponsorship contracts. If I wanted to sell you a course on polygamy, I'd call it the Lindbergh method, and you'd buy all the seats. His highest aerobatics weren't in the sky, but in his ability to cover his tracks on the ground in time. A diagnosis of insanity is sometimes just a bad cover for a government failure. Ernest Hemingway, in the last years of his life, turned into a paranoiac who constantly claimed that secret agents were following him, tapping his phone and checking his mail. Doctors nodded sympathetically, diagnosed him, and burned his brain with electroshock therapy sessions, trying to erase these hallucinations. But decades later, The Bureau of Investigation declassified its archives. They really were tailing him around the clock, listening to every breath and watching every step. The writer was perfectly sane, yet they treated him for reality, destroying his neural connections with electricity. We're used to trusting people in white coats, thinking they fix our breakdowns, but in fact, they might just format the hard drive to fit us into a convenient standard. It's as if Jason Bourne were thrown into a madhouse just because he runs too fast from hitmen. Hemingway didn't lose to an illness. He lost to a system that convinced everyone that the one seeing the truth is the madman. An excellent lesson for those who think paranoia is always a fantasy. Royal blood is just a beautiful excuse to chop off a head. Mary Tudor, the younger sister of a despotic monarch, did the unthinkable. She secretly married a commoner, so that her formidable brother wouldn't shorten them by a head for such a drop in dynasty ratings. This couple spent years playing a public charade called "We're Just Good Friends," expecting executioners with an axe every single second. We watch historical dramas admiring the power and luxury of monarchs, but in reality, their life was like a stealth mission in a hardcore video game, where one wrong move leads to a fatal loading screen. It's a monstrous distortion of logic when a person has the status of a demigod but is forced to hide in corners like a teenager smoking behind the garages. For years, they wore masks of indifference, proving that the cruelest prison is built not of stone, but of titles and social expectations. Video game assassins nervously smoke on the sidelines, looking at this level of stealth. Your corporate dress code is nothing compared to the prospect of losing your neck over a random kiss. America's velvet voice was just a beautiful microphone for organized crime. Frank Sinatra spent his entire life fiercely proving to the press that he was as clean as a baby's tear. But as soon as his show ended forever, the feds rolled out a 2,400-page dossier. It turned out that the legendary singer didn't just drink whiskey with Cosa Nostra bosses. He worked as their elite courier and carried out errands on which criminal empires depended. We love listening to his romantic ballads, imagining ourselves as aristocrats in a villa, but in fact, it's the soundtrack for money laundering. It's as if we found out that a mafia godfather moonlights as a singing animator at children's parties in his spare time just to avoid the attention of the tax office. Brilliant camouflage, where a microphone stand is used instead of a silencer. Sing that to your reflection in the mirror, you armchair mobsters. The ideologist of family comfort turned out to be a skilled architect of domestic hell. Charles Dickens, whose novels made society weep over the hard fate of orphans and believe in virtue, in reality, pulled off a trick worthy of an architectural maniac. He secretly built a brick wall right in the middle of his mansion, dividing the space in two. On one side, this moralist built a love nest with his 18-year-old mistress, and on the other, he locked up his lawful wife, strictly forbidding her to even see their shared children. We put his dusty volumes on our shelves to show our intelligence, soaking up morality from a man who physically walled up his spouse like expired goods in a warehouse. This is some twisted life simulator where the player simply deleted the door to an unwanted character's room and went to drink tea. Classic hypocrisy. Teaching the planet humanism while your captive cries behind the wall. Your home renovation doesn't seem so catastrophic anymore, does it? Okay, stop. Take a deep breath. What, your fists are already itching to throw half your home library in the trash. Do you want to tape over your laptop camera and put on a tin-foil hat? Wait, don't run for the sedatives just yet. We've only just begun to peel off the top layer of this historical plaster. It's only going to get more fun from here. The most energetic president of the free world was just a walking medicine cabinet on hinges. The image of John Kennedy as a glowing with health, tanned leader was the most expensive illusion of the 20th century. When his medical records finally saw the light of day, the academic community choked on its coffee. He suffered from severe Addison's disease, which was literally making his spine crumble. Just to stand up straight, he wore a rigid orthopedic corset, and it was precisely because of this armor that he physically couldn't duck during the assassination attempt. And to fake vigor, he popped 10 to 12 extremely powerful drugs every single day. We vote for a picture, believe in charisma and youth, But we're ruled by a biomechanical mannequin held together by painkillers and stimulants. If Iron Man assembled his suit out of pills and bandages, he'd look exactly like this. We were sold the image of an alpha male, but in reality, it was an intensive care patient who just had a smile drawn on with a marker. An excellent reason to reconsider your trust in fitness trainer ads. The quintessential Hollywood airhead wrapped an entire planet of snobs around her finger. Everyone's used to thinking of Marilyn Monroe as an empty-headed blonde with a beautiful facade, created only for eye candy. Imagine the surprise of intellectuals when historians cracked open her secret diaries, later published under the title Fragments. There were no shopping lists or gossip. The pages were covered in profound philosophical treatises, complex poetry, and analysis of her own psyche. It turned out that the image of a naive, breathy fool was a phenomenally calculated acting performance, a mask she permanently glued to her face for the sake of box office receipts. We love to attach labels, feeling our superiority over pop culture, but this woman manipulated us like an experienced puppeteer handling blind kittens. It's a harsh glitch in the matrix of stereotypes. Imagine your talking toaster suddenly starting to quote Nietzsche and mock your eating habits. She gave the world exactly what it wanted to see: beautiful emptiness, while hiding her genius in a notebook. Checkmate, armchair critics with honors degrees. The British Knight of Charity used hospitals as his personal all-you-can-eat buffet for perversions. Jimmy Savile, a legendary TV presenter, philanthropist, and friend of the royal family, seemed like a saint in a shiny tracksuit during his lifetime, but as soon as dirt hit the lid of his box, the illusion crumbled to dust. Police reports showed that this smiling eccentric was one of the most prolific serial pedophiles in British history. He raised millions for charity, only to gain unhindered access to children's hospital wards, where he did his dark deeds under the cover of an untouchable hero's status. We donate money to funds, applaud media idols, and believe in their boundless kindness, sponsoring monsters in the process. It's like hiring a horror movie clown as a kindergarten director and rejoicing that he hands out red balloons for free. The system didn't just glitch. It gave this monster a golden ticket because his ratings blinded all the watchdogs. I hope your donations go exclusively to feeding stray cats. A masterpiece of world literature about split personalities was written on a horse-sized dose of banned stimulants. Robert Louis Stevenson, who gave us Treasure Island, was always considered a respectable classic. But the truth about the creation of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde will make literary scholars nervously swallow. He cranked out this terrifying novel about the dark side of man during a brutal narcotic marathon. The writer was under the continuous influence of cocaine for exactly 6 days, not closing his eyes and churning out tens of thousands of words, while his family watched in horror, trying to hide this disgrace from prudish society. We make schoolchildren write essays about the depth of his moral message, searching for hidden meanings in every comma, but the author was simply writing a chemical overload of neurotransmitters. It's like analyzing the architectural genius of a beaver that chugged energy drinks and built a dam out of the neighbor's fence. All this high classic literature is just a transcript of side effects. Your literature teacher definitely never told you that. The father of modern physics would have rather brewed potions than studied apples. Isaac Newton gave humanity the laws of gravity, becoming a symbol of rational science. But when economist John Maynard Keynes bought secret chests with his manuscripts at an auction, the academic world shuddered. It turned out that the greatest physicist was secretly a religious fanatic and an obsessed alchemist. He spent the lion's share of his life not on optics or mechanics, but on attempts to brew the philosopher's stone in dirty flasks and calculate the exact date of the end of the world from biblical texts. We build spaceships based on his formulas, while the creator of these formulas himself considered them just a side hobby between magical rituals. Imagine the lead developer of Google Maps secretly drawing flat Earth diagrams to find the edge of the world. All our rigorous science is based on the calculations of a man who dreamed of turning lead into gold with spells. Gravity works even if a self-taught sorcerer discovered it. The inventor of the assembly line became the only American muse for the main dictator of the 20th century. Henry Ford went down in textbooks as a genius businessman who put the world on the wheels of affordable cars. But his corporation's PR managers still break out in a cold sweat when someone brings up his literary tastes. Ford secretly sponsored the publication of aggressive anti-Semitic newspapers, spreading his paranoid views in print runs of hundreds of thousands of copies. His articles were so radical that Adolf Hitler himself reverently quoted the American industrialist in his infamous book, calling him his inspiration. We admire his business models, study his biography and management courses, but this guy organized the mass production not only of cars but also of concentrated hate. It's as if a tech genius from Silicon Valley secretly financed the development of a battle space station for intergalactic villains, while we rejoice at the new electric cars. Technological progress with a distinct stench of ideological rot. Good thing his cars couldn't march in formation. The creator of the coziest fairy tales turned out to be a domestic tyrant without an ounce of empathy. Enid Blyton, whose children's detective stories and magical tales sold millions of copies, seemed like an ideal loving mother. The illusion held strong until her own daughter released a revealing memoir. It turned out that the woman who taught children all over the world about friendship and justice pathologically hated her own offspring. She subjected them to constant emotional abuse, mocked their flaws, and demanded absolute silence in the house so nothing would distract her from writing about fictional happy families. A receipt from a bookstore is our investment in the legacy of a person whose empathy was amputated at the genetic level. It's like commissioning a cozy kindergarten design from a maximum security prison warden. She created fairy tale worlds out of letters only because in the real world she was incapable of loving even her reflection in her children's eyes. The fairy tale is a lie, but inside it lies severe psychological trauma. A national hero took his last breath in the arms of another man's wife while his security detail cleaned up the mess. Franklin Roosevelt, the president who guided America through the Great Depression and a war, was always positioned as the perfect partner to his devoted spouse Eleanor. But the official chronicle is just a well-edited movie. When the leader of the free world passed into oblivion, the person sitting next to him was not his lawful wife at all, but his longtime secret mistress, Lucy Mercer. The Secret Service, risking everything, panicked and smuggled this woman off the premises, hiding this spicy fact for years so as not to ruin the bronze monument of the Commander-in-Chief's family values. We believe in the infallibility of political icons, study their speeches, but they run soap operas right in the Oval Office at the taxpayer's expense. Imagine a dark Sith Lord asking stormtroopers to hide his second family right before the final battle, so the Emperor wouldn't strip him of his bonus. This whole state machine operated like an elite agency for covering up marital affairs. Vote with your heart, but cheat with your personal security. The genius of Cubism used the female psyche as a canvas for his sadistic experiments. Pablo Picasso is recognized as a tremendous creator whose paintings are worth hundreds of millions. But biographers who brushed the dust off his personal life discovered a true psychological butcher behind the easel. Out of the 7 main muses in his life, statistics paint a horrific portrait. 2 women went insane and ended up in psychiatric asylums, and 2 more voluntarily ended their existence, unable to withstand his endless mockery, manipulation, and emotional terror. He literally fed on their pain to smear paint on the canvas. We stand in galleries, reverently examining these angular faces on portraits, not even realizing that we are looking at a documentary chronicle of the destruction of another person's soul. It's like admiring the perfect symmetry of a car crash on a high-speed highway. Art requires sacrifice isn't a sublime metaphor for artists. It's a direct order for annihilation, beautifully packaged in a mahogany frame. I honestly wish he'd just painted baskets of fruit. The first American woman in space took her biggest earthly secret beyond the atmosphere of silence. Sally Ride became a symbol of national triumph, breaking the glass ceiling in the Harsh Boys Club of astronauts. But the price of this ticket to the stars turned out to be almost 30 years of absolute lies. Only after her obituary was published did the world learn with surprise that for the last 27 years of her life, she had been in a same-sex relationship with her partner Tam O'Shaughnessy. The brilliant researcher was terrified of being fired from the space agency until her very last breath. So in public, she played the role of a lonely Iron Lady. We take pride in technological progress, launch ships to distant galaxies, yet our corporate culture forces people to hide in their closet as if we are still living in the times of the Inquisition. It's pure surrealism. A person isn't afraid to ride thousands of tons of explosives flying into a vacuum, but is scared to death to tell their boss who they drink their morning coffee with. A spacesuit turned out to be an excellent shelter from pathetic earthly prejudices. The main hippie of the planet was recognized as national security threat number one. John Lennon, singing about world peace and love, seemed to the authorities to be just a harmless musician with a guitar. But when bullets cut his song short, journalists dragged intelligence dossiers into the light that make your hair stand on end. The United States government paranoidally watched his every step, considering his influence on the youth so dangerous that they seriously developed plans for his immediate deportation. The feds were afraid that one chord from this guy in glasses could spark a revolution and blow their offices to hell. We were sold on the merch, made to consider him a symbol of relaxed pacifism, but in reality he was more terrifying to the system than a heavily armed partisan squad. It's as if intelligence threw all its forces into wiretapping cartoon characters, fearing they were hypnotizing the nation. Music turned out to be not just air vibration, but a real weapon of mass destruction against the brains of corrupt politicians. Sing a song about peace, and an armored van will come for you. So, are you still here? Surprising. Usually by this point, people's eyes start twitching and they go check their family tree, hoping there are no great writers or presidents in it. You're holding up well. Your illusions are bursting at the seams, but you keep watching us saw through these golden calves with a two-handed saw. Pull yourself together, the best is yet to come. The king of rock and roll didn't leave the stage due to a weak heart, but because of a chemical tsunami in his blood. The official version stated that Elvis Presley left the building because of cardiology problems caused by his love for fried sandwiches. This beautiful fairy tale was guarded for decades so the fans wouldn't cry too loudly. Classified data from toxicologists uncovered the horrifying truth. In the last 8 months of his life, his personal doctor prescribed the singer over 10,000 doses of various narcotic and prescription substances. He wasn't a man with a guitar. He was a walking, sweating pharmacy whose body simply couldn't handle such abuse of its chemical panel. We danced to his hits, copy his hairstyle, but the king was just a hostage to his status, pumped full of chemicals until he was a vegetable in a sequined suit. If a cyborg decided to run on batteries made of stimulants, it would break down halfway too. The industry squeezed all the juice out of him, tossed a handful of pep pills inside, and threw the empty shell out to amuse the roaring crowd. Viva Las Vegas, where only Big Pharma always wins. The author of the Declaration of Independence had highly specific views on freedom in his own bedroom. Thomas Jefferson, one of the great founding fathers of the United States, spent his life fiercely denying dirty rumors about his relationship with his own black slave, Sally Hemings. Historians took his word for it for centuries. But science doesn't forgive political hypocrisy. In 1998, a ruthless DNA analysis dotted all the I's. The fighter for freedom turned out to be the biological father of at least 6 children by this disenfranchised woman. He wrote laws about equality by day and used his right as a slave owner by night. We memorize his pompous quotes about human rights, while this enlightened gentleman played God on his plantation. It's as if the head of an animal protection society secretly owned an underground factory making coats out of rare leopards. Double standards of such colossal power could provide electricity to a small metropolis. Marble monuments excellently hide dirty laundry. All men are created equal, but some are more equal in the dark. The alien musician turned his own, fading into a perfect commercial release. David Bowie was always a master of shock value, but his final trick exceeded all expectations. When he suddenly left us, fans froze in shock, considering it a tragic accident. In reality, this genius knew for exactly a year and a half that a fatal liver pathology was slowly devouring him. Instead of asking for sympathy, he hid this fact even from his closest colleagues to record a prophetic album in absolute secrecy, which came out exactly 2 days before his physical end. We hide from diagnoses, hope for a miracle, but this guy used his own finale as a marketing campaign for a record. This is an absolute level of cynical control over reality. Imagine a director shooting a disaster movie while inside a falling airplane just to upload it to the internet a second before hitting the ground. He monetized his departure so elegantly that marketers can only bite their elbows in envy. The stardust flew away but left us the bill for listening. The Holy Liberator of India tested his willpower in a very creepy way. Mahatma Gandhi, the man whose name became the global synonym for nonviolent resistance and spiritual purity, took up a hobby in his old age that makes modern therapists' hair stand on end. To prove his spiritual resilience, this enlightened elder practiced so-called chastity tests. He forced his young grandnieces to sleep in the same bed with him completely naked, explaining it as training his control over base instincts. We print his profile on tote bags next to the peace sign, without even guessing that this spiritual guru was running a casting couch in his bedroom that would get him serious hard time today. It's as if a radical vegan surrounded himself with fresh steaks every night, forcing pigs to watch as he bravely refrained from eating meat. The highest degree of twisted selfishness, covered up by the loftiest philosophical ideals. An excellent excuse for a dirty old man, but we aren't buying it. The real-world Iron Man rotted alive in his own madness and jars of biological waste. Howard Hughes, a genius billionaire, aviator, and the prototype for the famous superhero, was the embodiment of the American dream during his life. But his finale turned out to be endlessly far from Hollywood standards of a beautiful life. The great industrialist ended his days in a dark hotel room, hiding from the whole world. He maniacally didn't cut his nails for years, carefully sorted and stored his own urine in glass bottles, and died of simple starvation, turning into a skeleton weighing just 41 kilograms. We're made to dream about billions in our accounts, instilled with the idea that money buys absolute freedom, but in the end, the richest man on the planet locked himself in a voluntary prison of paranoia and filth. This is a classic Matrix bug. You maxed out your account level, bought all the locations, and then went crazy and started eating pixels in the corner of the map. Wealth doesn't fix a leaking roof, it just makes that roof encrusted with diamonds. Envy in silence, dear seekers of ultimate success. The voice of a snowy Christmas beat the crap out of his kids with metal spikes. Bing Crosby, whose velvet tone still echoes in every shopping mall on the eve of the holidays, sold the world the image of a cozy, perfect dad in a knitted sweater. But behind the closed doors of his home reigned chilling horror. After his departure, his own son Gary dumped a memoir on the public, detailing how this kind singer systematically and brutally beat his sons with a whip embedded with metal spikes, punishing them for the slightest misdeeds. We decorate the Christmas tree to his warm songs, buying the illusion of family happiness from a man who practiced medieval torture on his own heirs. Imagine that a rosy-cheeked Santa Claus moonlights as an executioner in a secret prison when he isn't handing out presents. We were sold the atmosphere of a miracle, generously watered with the tears of children who were afraid to even take an extra breath around this great artist. A white Christmas suddenly took on crimson tones. The Lord of Lightning ended his life in poverty, but made intelligence agencies sweat after his finale. Nikola Tesla died in a cheap hotel room. abandoned by everyone except the train station pigeons. It would seem, who needs an impoverished old man with his crazy ideas? Let me tell you, the United States government. Just hours after his heart stopped, federal agents raided his room. They completely scrubbed the place, confiscating absolutely all his diaries, notes, and blueprints. The Bureau still keeps some of these papers classified, terrified that the old man actually invented his mythical death ray. We laugh at crazy scientists from comedies, but real authorities are ready to rob the rooms of geniuses for the sake of a hypothetical superweapon. It's as if the tax office confiscated a child's building blocks, fearing he might accidentally assemble a functioning ballistic missile. This Serbian's genius scared the bureaucrats so much that they preferred to erase his legacy, just so it wouldn't fall to geopolitical competitors. Your rotor works thanks to a guy who got robbed by the Federal Bureau. The icon of Hollywood elegance worked as a secret courier for the resistance right under the noses of the Nazis. Audrey Hepburn, whose elegant outfits and huge eyes drove millions of men crazy, almost never commented on her childhood. Journalists thought it was just the coquetry of a capricious star. Historians found out that as a teenager, this fragile girl was an active liaison in the Dutch resistance. She risked her life every single second, carrying secret dispatches and partisan plans, hiding them in her ballet point shoes right in front of Gestapo patrols. We consider her just a beautiful doll in a black dress with pearls, the ideal of frivolous luxury, but this woman had nerves of steel that an elite special forces unit would envy. It's like finding out that a glamorous Barbie successfully defuses high explosive shells in the jungle in her spare time. Looks are the absolute perfect cover for real non-cinematic heroism. Breakfast at Tiffany's was paid for with a ticket to the hell of occupation. The creator of the gold standard of iron logic fell into a pit of cheap mysticism himself. Arthur Conan Doyle, who gave the world Sherlock Holmes, an unrivaled machine of deduction, seemed like a genius of rational thinking. But in his twilight years, the British writer's screws came entirely loose. He secretly and then openly went crazy over spiritualism. He blew a massive fortune trying to prove the existence of real fairies using fake photos taken by schoolgirls. Moreover, he had a massive falling out with the illusionist Harry Houdini, seriously accusing him of using black magic instead of simple sleight of hand. We teach children critical thinking through his detective stories, while the author himself turned into a willing victim of primitive charlatans with little saucers. It's an epic paradox of logic. Imagine the creator of the main antivirus secretly downloading malicious banners and believing his hard drive is cursed by voodoo shamans. A high intellect gives zero immunity against believing in outright nonsense. Elementary, my dear Watson, I just finally lost my marbles. The adopted children of a Hollywood diva were merely PR decorations for her nighttime tortures. The star of the golden age, Joan Crawford, constantly posed with adopted orphans, showing off her huge maternal heart to a greedy press. Glossy magazines cried tears of joy. But as soon as the light of her life went out, her adopted daughter, Christina, released a book called Mommy Dearest. It revealed that the actress tied the children to their beds, brutally beat them at night over crumbs on the floor, and used them exclusively as props to create a flawless image of a kind benefactor. We like the posts of celebrities who adopt dogs from shelters, not realizing that for them it's just a cheap way to buy our loyalty. This is business cynicism of the highest purity. If you could rent an orphan for an Oscar, half the actors would be standing in line with ticket numbers. She directed her life in such a way that behind the beautiful smile on the cover hid a domestic concentration camp with silk sheets. Thanks, Mommy Dearest, for the ruined psyche and the beautiful group photo. The leader of the nation traded thousands of his soldiers' lives for a comfortable chair in the Oval Office. Richard Nixon went down in history as the president who got burned on a banal wiretap of his competitors. But Watergate turned out to be child's play compared to his main act of high treason, which was hidden for decades. Recently declassified phone call recordings proved it. In 1968, He secretly, through grey middlemen, sabotaged the Vietnam peace talks. He did this exclusively so that the bloody conflict would continue, allowing him to win the election on loud promises to end the slaughter, which cost the lives of thousands more unsuspecting draftees. We naively think that politicians care about the nation, while these guys play Monopoly with other people's lives on a real tactical map. It's as if your doctor was secretly slipping poison into your tea, just to heroically treat you later for triple the rate. A man orchestrated a massive meat grinder just to hang his portrait on a government wall. Your life is just a cheap pawn in their grand election race. You've looked behind the scenes, and now this dirty curtain cannot be unseen. Our entire history is molded from carefully edited myths, where geniuses, heroes, and idols turn out to be maniacs, traitors, and hypocrites who brilliantly sold us their bright side. We bring our emotions to this circus of morality, clap our hands, and flatly refuse to notice the bloodstains on the sawdust. Do you still believe in infallible authorities? Congratulations, your brain has successfully passed the marketing formatting procedure. But if you're also sick of this glossy lying, it's time to stop being a silent battery for someone else's ego. Subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, and right now, write in the comments your version of the 34th secret about one of the untouchable idols. Let's tear off these fake halos together before they choke us completely.